Hello, everyone. Pastor Nathan Laska here with Daniel chapter 2. We're continuing in our Bible study in this wonderful, beautiful, and comforting book of Daniel, the prophet, the wise man. What a wise man does when kingdoms seem to be falling, when the nations of the earth seem to be in uproar. Daniel gives us such insight and wisdom and just helps center us in this world as Christians, in this world that's full of unpredictable things and people getting stirred up and anxious and worried about the future. Daniel is a fitting and wonderful book for Christians to be reading. Without further ado, we go into Daniel chapter 2. If you'd like to follow along, you sure, of course, are welcome to. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, the enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king in Aramaic, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Then the king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." Once more they replied, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Then the king answered, "I am certain that you are trying to gain time, because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is just one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me." The astrologers answered the king, "There is not a man on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among men." Stop there and discuss a couple of things. This is the Babylonian Empire, and this part of the Bible is actually written in Aramaic. This is the starting point of the Aramaic penmanship here in the book of Daniel. It goes until about, chapter 7, 8. I might have to correct myself on that. But it's important to understand these advisors and who they were, different categories of advisors: astrologers, magicians, enchanters, sorcerers. Babylon was a nation of many idols. As one nation conquered another, so it would seem that the winning nation's god was more powerful than the losing nation's god, and all of these idols kind of came together and formed this huge sort of menagerie of idols in the Middle East. Babylon's known for that, and that's kind of the religious environment we find ourselves in. And these different branches of advisors, maybe the astrologers took a section of these gods and studied them, and the enchanters took a section of these gods and studied them, and the sorcerers and the enchanters did likewise. Kings would consort with their sorcerers, astrologers, enchanters, in matters of foreign policy, in matters of trade, in matters of agriculture, in matters of war. They would gather them around and hear the wisdom of the day, and compile all this information that they were told by the astrologers, enchanters, and so on, and make decisions that way. So this is the world we find ourselves in. And Nebuchadnezzar, he has a dream and he wants to know what it means. This dream disturbs him. This dream, he knows it's about the future of his kingdom and the future of the world. He wants to get to the bottom of this. But he asks a very interesting question. He makes a very original demand. Tell me my dream first. Tell me what it was, and then interpret it. This was something that you see the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers, they try several times to get Nebuchadnezzar to retell this dream. Nebuchadnezzar, he's firmly decided. This will be a criteria check. Maybe there's a history of bad advice going on. Who knows? And so he makes this demand. Tell me what the dream is, and then interpret it. Do both things, not just the interpreting. And the magicians and the sorcerers and the astrologers, they all panic. Not a man on earth can do this. The gods are far away. They're not on earth. And this sets up the showdown that's in this chapter of Daniel. This idea of this plethora of gods, this menagerie of gods versus Daniel and the one God he worships. Over the kingdoms of the earth, over everything that happens, over all of history, the God of Israel, one God, monotheism. We see this showdown in this chapter, and we continue reading. Verse 12. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and the men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. Yikes. Then Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon. Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went in to the king and asked for time, so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Remember them from chapter 1, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So, Daniel using wisdom and tact. You see, we saw him use that in chapter 1 when he refused to compromise and he refused to eat the ceremonially unclean food. As an Old Testament believer, he refused to do that. Not in a disrespectful way, not in a let's fight the powers that be, let's start a revolution. Daniel is not that person. Daniel uses wisdom and tact, and he's buying time with this issue of the dream, which is really quite interesting because that's what the astrologers and sorcerers and enchanters were doing. Daniel, in a sense, is doing the same thing, but perhaps in a different way, perhaps in a more agreeable way. We hear how God has made people favorable to Daniel. So we also see the moodiness of Nebuchadnezzar. Um, the question will be posed quite a few times as we go through this study of Daniel. What do we think of this guy? What do we think of this man? Does he ever come to the point where we're comfortable saying he is a believer, where we know what he thinks and believes? And he'll also have several moments like this, where you see his temper, you see his rage, you see his ire. So he's an interesting character that we'll just keep poking and prodding and asking about as we go through this study of Daniel. Verse 19, during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and deposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and power, and you have made known to me what we ask of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. Daniel asks for mercy in this prayer. This night that he hopes to understand what the king's dream meant and what it was. He prays for mercy. He prays for wisdom. His prayer is full of thanksgiving. And Daniel says some amazing things. This is a beautiful prayer to the Lord, how wisdom and power and understanding, these things come from God. True wisdom doesn't come from a textbook. It doesn't come from our universities. True wisdom comes from God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All things crumble under scrutiny. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And there are mysteries in this world that we cannot figure out on our own. Christianity, Christ is one of them. There are things in this world that we cannot deduce on our own. These things must be revealed to us by God. The word mystery just means that something is unknown until it is revealed. And there are mysteries in this world. We are to be very careful and appropriately skeptical of those who think, oh, I have this supernatural knowledge. I just know it. It came to me. Wisdom comes from the Lord. He has promised to speak in his word. And there we are to look. In these moments of tension, we are to look to where God has promised to be in his word. We're to be appropriately skeptical of all other things. Daniel goes to his God for wisdom and understanding. Daniel interprets the dream. I think this is a message that we especially need to hear, what this dream actually is and what it means. Verse 24. Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means. The king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. Stop there. Keep you in suspense. We see the humility of Daniel. I'm not smarter than anyone else. I don't know any more than anyone else. I'm not academically more gifted than anyone else. There are lots of people in this world much more academically gifted than me. Wisdom comes from the Lord. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Christianity, this is what makes Christianity different than all other world religions. Christianity is revealed knowledge from God. We are dependent and we focus upon, and we don't go outside the box of what God has told us, what God has spoken, what God has said to us. We find him in his word. There is a God in heaven who reveals the mysteries. All other world religions, they do try to jump these gulfs. They do try to make some assumptions, work some things out for themselves. We as Christians, we're very honest. There are things we don't know. And sometimes the correct answer is, I don't know. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. The Christian faith is a faith that focuses on what it does know, what God has told us. Sins forgiven in Christ. What he's done for us. That's what we know. Back to the dream. You looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue. An enormous and dazzling statue. Awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs of bronze. Its legs of iron. Its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The winds swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. And now we will interpret it to the king. You see, O king, you are King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed mankind and the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, wherever they live. He has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. Nebuchadnezzar is that first piece, the head of gold in this dream. It's what the dream means. When we think of just the military prowess and the might and the threat and the woe that the Babylonian kingdom was. They were the head of gold. Nebuchadnezzar especially, the head of gold. So we have a golden head, Nebuchadnezzar. We have silver torso and arms. We have, chest and arms. We have bronze belly and thighs. we have iron legs, and we have iron and baked clay feet and base. So just different segments in this statue. I can find it for you here. I don't know if this will be helpful or not, but black and white picture, but here we have kind of something that might be helpful in picturing this. Head of gold, silver chest and arms, bronze belly and thighs, iron legs, and iron and baked clay feet and base. If Nebuchadnezzar represents the golden head, it's logical that different world empires represent the other segments. After you, another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours. And we look through our history books and we know it did. Persia. Persia came after Babylon. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. We look in our history books, that happened. Greece. Greece overthrew Persia, Alexander the Great. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. The world kingdom that came after the Greeks, the Romans. Romans are the iron legs, and especially at the feet and the base, that iron mixed with clay. There's going to be, it's going to be a divided kingdom. The Roman Empire certainly did split. The Roman Empire certainly was very divisive through time. It imploded and exploded upon itself. And some would still argue that the Roman Empire is still a thing, depending on how you define the word Roman and define the word empire. These are the world powers that are to be in place as history moves on. Kingdoms rising and falling until the end. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron and the bronze and the clay, the silver and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true and the interpretation is trustworthy. This rock that is not made from human hands, not cut out by the work of man. God's church. How God's church will remain until the end, and God's church will endure long after any human kingdom of the earth is on the scene. God's church will endure. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery, Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. Do we think this is saving faith from Nebuchadnezzar? I'm not comfortable saying that. I don't think many are. Academic knowledge about who God is, that's one thing. Saving faith, another. I don't want to speak for the man, but I just don't think we have enough evidence here. We do see Nebuchadnezzar as a secular leader, a secular ruler, impressed and friendly and kind to Daniel. That's what we see here. Daniel promoted. He's in charge of the province of Babylon, the capital province of the empire. Wow, that's really cool. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel's friends, they are promoted and elevated as well. Daniel in charge of all of the wise men. What an office that is. All these people who advise the king. Daniel, kind of the highlighted organizer of that. In this book of Daniel, you see what God is doing. Yes, horrible, heartbreaking things have happened to Israel and to Judah. The Babylonian captivity, awful, heartbreaking story, devastating. The sky is falling, the world is ending, many of those people thought and said. But there's this other side, too. We see what God is doing. God is using Daniel. He's putting him right there at the court in the king's ear to still help and bless his people. That rock that is cut out not by human hands, but will endure. We see that happening here as Daniel has the ear of the king. And God's people will be blessed because of what Daniel has done. We have been blessed. As Christians living wherever we're living, America or wherever you are, we have been blessed because of what Daniel has done. All the dominoes that had to fall historically in order to bring us to a baptismal font, that we clothe ourselves with Christ, that God has made us his very own. History is a weaving. And we just see a very, very little sliver of it in our lifetime. History can be divided into two words: his story. God is God's story. He raises and he dethrones kings. With everyone in angst and anxiety, a lot of people in angst and anxiety about all the direction the world might be heading, all the fear and uncertainty about the kingdoms of the earth and the rulers of the earth. Think of this statue and this dream and what it means. God raises kingdoms and empires, and he deposes them. His time, his way. The Lord is in control. It's the comforting message of this chapter 2 of Daniel, and it's the comforting message we keep with us as, yes, citizens of an earthly kingdom, but also as Christians, we are members of the kingdom of God that will endure forever. May God bless your day, and may God's peace be with you.